Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I particularly want to thank Neil from Portal to Ascension for allowing me this opportunity to present my UFO UAP timeline. I'm going to be talking about the key points and people in the timeline of cultural change since December 16th, 2017 up to July 2023. Literally today, I have a tweet at the very end of the presentation that's really important. There has been so much going on since 2017, and I've just condensed it to what I think are the main cultural moments. So I have included a lot of government things, a lot of institutional things. I'm going to be talking about congressional representatives and senators, because I think these really are the voices of cultural change. But there's been a lot more going on too. But let's just share this particular timeline. First of all, you may have noticed, if you've been following things, that the terms have kind of changed over time. We started out with UFO, which was unidentified flying object. But then you might have heard the term UAP, which started out as unidentified aerial phenomena. Now, there's some question about why and how this change happened. It really happened on a more governmental level. If you know the researcher Nick Pope, who is from Britain, he said when he was in the government there that they used the term UAP, and then the American government sort of took that term so that the stigma and baggage with UFO wasn't in all their talks. You know, it was just a little less stigmatized, and they thought UAP sounded better. I have heard other people talk about the original people who coined that term differently, but that's one of the stories. Then that term UAP was still used, but it meant unidentified aerospace phenomena, which was made so that you could think of it as within our airspace where planes fly, but then also space beyond our atmosphere. And it wanted to take that into account. But then, as you'll see, as we're going through these past couple of years, it changed to unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena. And that's because government people really realized that not only were unidentified objects seen in our air and in space, but these objects were also going underwater and coming out of water. So they included UAP to be unidentified aerospace undersea phenomena. And then very recently, they just changed it again to be unidentified anomalous phenomena, which is pretty better. I think it's better. It's a better term because it's a broader term, because we truly don't know what this phenomena is. So just to call it anomalous, I think that's a pretty good use of the term. So let's begin now with December 16th, 2017. This was a milestone in terms of cultural change. On this date, the New York Times, Politico, and the Washington Post, all three same day, published news stories about the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or ATIP as it was called, which studied unidentified aerial phenomena, which is what they called it back then, which now stands for, like I said, unidentified anomalous phenomena. It was reported that UAPs were seen by pilots and other military personnel and appeared vastly more advanced than any technology currently known to man. The UAPs maneuvered so unusually and so fast that they seemed to defy the currently understood laws of physics. Luis Elizondo led the Pentagon's secret ATIP program up until October 2017, when he resigned his position to protest what he characterized as excessive secrecy and internal opposition to the program. He was trying to get his information about what he learned about UAP up to Jim Mattis, who was then the Secretary of Defense, who Luis Elizondo had combat experience with. He really honored James Mattis, and wanted to get him this information. But there were people in between Luis Elizondo and the secretary that were keeping the information from getting to him. And Luis was so frustrated. He tried all different ways to get the information to go up. He couldn't. And so he resigned so that he could continue his mission outside of the government. And he then joined To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, but now he has since left that organization. Now, according to Luis Elizondo, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, of which he was the director, evolved out of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Application Program, or AAWSAP as it was called, that was created in 2007 by Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, with support from Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska, who had his own UFO experience when he was an Army Air Force pilot during World War II. And also Senator Daniel Inouye of Hawaii was a backer of this new program. AAWSAP became operational in 2008 when the Defense Intelligence Agency contracted the Las Vegas-based company BASS, or Bigelow's Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, which was a subsidiary of Bigelow Aerospace, to investigate UFOs as well as much broader range of related phenomena. Some of you may know that at that time back then, Bigelow's group was the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, and he since sold it to the now current owner. So back at that time, $22 million was allocated to the BASS effort. When the funding for AAWSAP was siphoned away by other Pentagon programs, AAWSAP was renamed ATIP and continued, but now with a smaller focus. The focus changed to researching the advanced physics and engineering demonstrated by the UAPs in relation to military encounters and to determine if they represented a national security threat. Some of the issues ATIP looked at were UAP lift, propulsion, power generation, signature reduction, materials, and human effects. To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science gave a sort of press conference back in October of 2017. These are the founding members: Tom DeLonge, Christopher Mellon, Luis Elizondo, Steve Justice, Dr. Hal Puthoff, and Jim Semivan. According to Jim Semivan, in an interview he had with the UAP Studies podcast in September of 2022, Jim Semivan said, Tom DeLonge had a conversation with him, Jim Semivan, and they decided to start To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, along with Hal Puthoff and two other gentlemen who changed their minds because they had too many other commitments. We don't know who these two other people are. Then, when Luis Elizondo decided to leave his government job, Jim Semivan introduced Lou to Tom DeLonge, and Lou agreed to join the TTSA. Then Jim Semivan called Christopher Mellon to ask him some questions, and Chris decided to join. Soon after, Steve Justice from Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works joined, and it all happened very quickly. When COVID hit and funding dropped, TTSA decided to focus on entertainment to keep the company afloat. So in 2021, some of these key original members left the organization. Then in January 2022, they rebranded to the Stars. Research is on the back burner, they say, but they still intend on doing it because when they were originally founded, they wanted to research materials that they had that they thought might be otherworldly. They wanted to research other types of ways to create potentially craft that had some of the propulsion methods that they found in these other UAPs. So they had a lot of high hopes, and then it kind of went away, and we'll see what happens to them in the future. Here's what they say on their website. To the Stars is now an award-winning vertically integrated entertainment company that creates original content informed by our experiences working with prestigious government agencies and academic institutions. It's told across film, television, publishing, and merchandise with the goal of turning the world on to new ideas and new possibilities. And here's the current board of directors. As I mentioned, Tom DeLonge was really the main instigator to get this up and going. And he is still right now in Blink 182. He's still going out there and rocking, as you say. He's still with his group. And then here's Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan had 25 years as operations officer for the Central Intelligence Agency Directorate of Operations. He was extremely high up CIA person, so he knows a lot. And then also on the advisory board, we see here Dr. Hal Puthoff. He has his own Earth Tech International company. And if you recognize maybe Dr. Hal Puthoff's name, he was one of the founders for remote viewing that actually did amazing research back in the 70s and 80s. And they were training government, military to be psychic spies, essentially. Another important member that left in 2021 is Steve Justice. He worked for 39 years for Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works program. That's the secret program that develops all of these breakthrough technology things. He worked on the development of the F-117A Nighthawk, the world's first stealth attack aircraft. So he understands some of these technical aspects, and it may be that he knows where some of these secret programs are. I don't know. I'm just saying I never heard that. And then the two most important people that we have to give so much credit to for this cultural change that's been happening is Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. Luis, as I mentioned, is the former director of the ATIP program. Now it is said that he's advising the U.S. Space Force on classified topics, and he's writing his book, which is supposed to be due out this year. Christopher Mellon, I would have to say, if we had to pick one person, it's Christopher Mellon, who is really doing all of the behind the scenes work to change the culture. He spent 20 years in the federal government. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Bill Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, and Minority Staff Director of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. At one time during his position within the Pentagon, it is said that Christopher Mellon was one of 3 people who knew what all of the Black programs were. So Christopher Mellon knows what's going on and knows what he doesn't know, what he hasn't been able to access as well. But he's the guy. He's the guy. There's been a lot of really important people, but if we had to pick one guy, it's Christopher Mellon. So let's look at the videos that helped change the culture here. The Tic Tac, the gimbal, and the Go Fast videos. Part of what made that December 16th, 2017 news stories so compelling was that they were accompanied by 2 videos released to the media, with a third video released a few months later. The videos are known as the Tic Tac, the gimbal, and the Go Fast videos. The videos show unidentified anomalous phenomena recorded by Navy pilots. 2 of the videos contain service members reacting in awe at how quickly the objects are moving. The Navy acknowledged the authenticity of these videos in September of 2019. In addition, in 2019, the Navy instituted formal guidelines for how its pilots should report a possible UFO UAP encounter. According to the Navy's new policy, quote, strange sightings warrant an investigation and need to be formally documented. So here's the first video that became known as the Tic Tac. It was taken by a U.S. Navy FA-18 Super Hornet off the coast of San Diego, California in 2004. The nuclear-powered USS Nimitz was the lead vessel of a carrier strike group that included 2 destroyers, a submarine, and a radar-equipped missile cruiser, the USS Princeton. Over the course of 2 weeks, the USS Princeton repeatedly detected unidentified objects operating near the Nimitz carrier battle group off the coast of San Diego. And so what I'm going to show you is the short little video that was captured by these folks. One of the things I do have to mention that was really interesting, that in an interview Luis Elizondo gave, he said there was a lot of nuclear energy associated with this whole group. And one of the things we're not going to be talking about tonight is that the UAP tend to like to be around nuclear powered things, both military and private power companies as well. So there's a nuclear UAP kind of connection that we're still researching here. But anyway, let me show you just a portion of this video. You've probably seen it. This is the one where nobody's talking. And it's just the shape of a Tic Tac, that oblong shape. And the operator of the camera is switching the camera to get different kinds of information. So changing it from dark mode to light mode to dark mode. And eventually this Tic Tac's just going to take off at a high rate of speed, and they can't follow it. They can't retain the lock on it. And there it goes. Now, that really wasn't so interesting. You know, it's kind of, taken by some Navy pilots. That's interesting. But here is what's interesting. This is Commander Fravor, Commander David Fravor, and he's talking about his experience with this Tic Tac. This, to me, is what's really interesting.
Here's actually what happened. So it was 2004. I had just taken over the squadron. I took over about October 16th. And we were doing workups with the cruiser, which is the USS Princeton, which is an Aegis class cruiser, which has one of the most sophisticated radar systems in the world. And we're going to go do some, it's called air defense. So we take off, the other airplanes joining up, and the USS Princeton calls me up. So he says, well, hey, we're going to cancel training and we're going to go do a real world operation. So we're thinking, hey, off the coast of Mexico, real world operation, drug runners. Yeah. So we're like, oh, I'm in on that. So we go out and we've got our radars looking and the radar doing this. And we're looking out and we're not seeing anything. And they're calling 40 miles, 30 miles, 20 miles, 10 miles. And we're just saying we're clean, which means we don't see anything. We're getting no indications of anything out there. So we get out there, he calls merge plot. So we're in the airplane, my wingman's off to the left-hand side. And when they call merge plot, we say it's doing the Stevie Wonder. So you start doing this. Because now it's somewhere around you and they're not helping find it because you're in the same, you're in the same room. So as we look off the right-hand side, you know, and this is, I gotta caveat. This is a clear, no clouds, perfect Southern California day. Light wind, no white caps, blue water, blue sky. We look down, we're looking around, and as I look off the right side, we see something that's causing the waves to break. We start thinking, oh, it's probably a seamount. As we're looking down, now picture it looks, the disturbance, the white water is kind of about the size of a 737 airplane. So as we look down, I'm kind of like looking at the white water going, what's that? And it draws our eyes onto the Tic Tac. So the guy in the back seat of the other airplane, because F-18Fs, these are Super Hornets, brand new too, right out of the factory. The guy, you know, so we have a backseater. So the guy in the backseat of the other jet says, hey, Skipper, because that's what they called me. You go, hey, Skipper, do you? And I kind of finished the sentence, dude, do you see that? And we're watching this little white object and it's oriented north-south and it's going like this. And it's not, it doesn't, like a helicopter would do this. So the first thing we see, what do you think? Helicopter, right? There's a white thing down there. So what do? When you see a helicopter, because I've seen them a gazillion times, there's rotor wash that comes off of them, right? And you'll start seeing the water. It kind of beats the water down below it and you'll see there's no mist. It's just doing this. And it's kind of going up and down like the southern little thing that came off the object, and it goes up and it goes left, goes right. But normally when a helicopter does that, it kind of goes like this. And then when it's trying to go the other way, it'll kind of slide a little bit because of inertia, and then it'll go back the other way. It doesn't do that. It goes real abrupt. So as we're kind of driving around this, get over to about the 9 o'clock position. We're still at 20,000 feet. They're sitting over here. I said, I'm gonna go check it out. The other airplane said, I'm gonna stay up here. I said, yeah, you stay up here. You take high cover. Just watch us. So now they can watch both me and the thing. I'm gonna go down and see how close I can get this thing. So we keep going around. I start a nice, easy descent. You know, not necessarily cautious because of the object, but you can really lose how high you are over the water because it looks the same at 100 feet as it does at 10,000 feet. So you can, and I wouldn't be the first one to try and fly through it. Doesn't work. So I get to about the 12 o'clock position. The little object's still doing this, right? It's about 50 feet off the water. So we're descending and we get to about the 12 o'clock. It goes boop, just like this and starts coming up.
Reacting to you.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I'm like, woo, all right. So we keep coming down and it keeps coming up. And we go all the way around the circle until I get over to about the 8 o'clock position. By now I'm probably around, estimate, this is a recall from almost 15 years ago, I'm probably about 15,000 feet. And the object is somewhere around probably 12,000 feet. So I'm getting closer. And it's about a mile across. So we're in a circle, we're just driving around. Everyone did that as kids, you know, keep running around the circle. And you'll do it all day long until they tire themselves out. There's always that kid that cheats. So what do? Cut across the circle. So I go like this. I drop my nose. It's called an aggressive nose-low maneuver. And I go across. So I'm going, instead of around, I'm going around this way. And I'm thinking, so it's here. And I'm going to try and get over and get it. So I start pulling across the circle. It's coming up, gets in front of my nose. You see it start to accelerate and it goes poof, and it's gone. So then you go, all right. I was kind of weirded out. I actually told my backseater, I go, whoop. I asked the plane up above us, I said, hey, do you see it? And they said, no, it just disappeared. I'm like, okay, a little bit weirded out. So we turn around. So I said, well, let's turn around. Let's go see what was, what was causing the water to turn white. So we turn around. So we're right there. It's not, it's gone. There's no white water, no Tic Tac, no nothing. So we turn around and I'm like, well, because I'm the boss. Okay, we got to go get some training, right? So let's go. So we start flying back to our cap point, which is about 60 miles away. And the controller comes up, says, sir, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, that thing, it's at your cap point, just hanging out, 20,000 feet. So I'm like, okay. So we get up, we drive, we never see it. We come back to the Nimitz and land. Strangest day of my entire life, right? So we come back and land, and we have a thing called it's the parallel office where we store our flight gear. So we come inside, we're taking off the gear, and the four of us are talking about this. Like, oh my God, what was that? Well, another of my crews is getting ready to launch. And they're listening to us, and the backseater decided, hey, I'm gonna go try and find this thing. He knew where our cap points were at because we use them over and over for the training. And so he takes off. We have no, we're doing our debrief, trying to figure out what we just saw. He goes and flies, hour and a half later, he comes back and he had walked into intel because we have to go into intelligence and debrief. And the backseaters go do that. And they're like, hey, we saw this thing. We don't know what it was. They're like, great. And they're making fun of us, of course. And so when he walks in, they go, oh, VFA 41, see any UFOs? And the backseater goes, as a matter of fact, I did. And he drops the tape, which is the minute 30-second video that you guys see. So I got a lot of experience. I looked at it for over 5 minutes and I chased it. I got within a half mile of it. And it had no wings. It had no rotors. You can look in the video. It had no known propulsion system. There's no plume coming out. There's no heat signature, no nothing. We had talked to the cruiser while we're doing all this. I said, well, what is this? He said, well, sir, we've been tracking these things, up to 10 of them, for the last 2 weeks. And this is the first time we had manned airplanes airborne when it showed up. They'd been coming down from above 80,000, come down, hang out at 20,000 for about 3 hours, and they go straight back up. Right. So we just happened to be out there when one was there, and I'm sitting in front of y'all here in McMinnville, Oregon, talking about it. Here's actually.
So that's the pilot talking who had that experience. I mean, you kind of can't beat that. That's really major. And then there were 2 other videos that came out too. The second one is called The Gimbal. And Christopher Mellon said this, to give additional information to the video that everybody, again, has probably seen. He says, when the crew says there's a whole fleet of them out there right at the beginning of this video, what the pilots are talking about is that there wasn't only the one craft that starts turning. There was a V formation of smaller craft that were going in front of it. And they appeared to be black cubes that were inside of a transparent sphere about 6 feet in diameter. Again, no discernible air inlets, exhaust, wings, or means of lift or propulsion. And they have been tracked at supersonic speed and seem to be able to just stay against the wind just indefinitely. So these kind of craft were also seen by the pilots, but the video focused on the big gimbal-shaped object. And gimbal really was given that name because it's rotating. So here's this video. I'm going to start it and go in a little bit. See here.
The whole fleet of them, what's on the say? My God. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. What are that thing doing? It's not LNS though, is it? It's not. I had to do it on. But if there's a it's rotating.
And then the third video is known as the Go Fast video. This was filmed several weeks after the gimbal video by the same FA-18 crew.
Okay. Oh God, dude. Wow.
Lieutenant Ryan Graves was part of the group of Navy aviators who were seeing these objects. And it was his squadron that actually got some of this footage. Lieutenant Ryan Graves didn't take it, but he knew the people that did. Again, the the Go Fast and the gimbal were taken on the East Coast in between Virginia and Florida. And Lieutenant Ryan Graves has become a major person for, again, the cultural change that I've been talking about. He was a speaker at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics Conference in August of 2021. And this is a big deal because the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is the world's largest aerospace technical and professional society for the field of aerospace engineering, having an active membership nearing 30,000 aerospace industry specialists. It includes among its members the country's largest defense and NASA contractors. So these are scientists, technical people. These are not UFO enthusiasts, let's say. These are serious folk, not to say us UFO folk are serious too, but these are really more technically minded people. And they describe aeronautics as the design, development, analysis, testing, and production of aircraft for military or civilian markets. Astronautics is the design, development, analysis, testing, and production of rockets, spacecraft, and global space systems. Well, the AIAA hosts and organizes conferences and events where all of these aerospace professionals exchange information, present their findings, network, and collaborate. So at this August 2021 conference, the focus was on unidentified aerial phenomena, and they had a bunch of speakers speaking on this topic. Ryan Graves, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, his main focus really is on safety, on the safety of the pilots. That's his main focus. And so he spoke at this conference and told them about his experience and what was going on, and that they had just upgraded their radar, and that might be part of the reason they were picking up these objects. It's possible that these objects were always there, but the new radar was able to tell them that there was something in the area. And so after the conference, the folks were very interested in what Ryan Graves had to say. And so he said he then, with a couple of other founding members, established what they call a UAP community of interest within this organization. And again, the charter is to improve aviation safety. That is his main focus, and to enhance scientific knowledge and mitigating barriers to the study of UAP. And he was elected chair of this community of interest. And then just recently, he helped to found this Americans for Safe Aerospace. This is a nonprofit led by other military pilot folk, and they want to, again, look at this safe aerospace factor, not just military, but for commercial pilots as well. Now I'm going to talk about how Congress has gotten involved. So after these 3 videos were released to the public, members of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the House Homeland Security Committee requested high-level briefings from the Pentagon. And Senator Marco Rubio was important in getting some of this legislation passed. And he has a bunch of videos out there that you can take a look at. And it's fascinating that he's so forward in describing what he thinks about these things. Then in August of 2020, they had a press release on the establishment of the UAP task force. This will come into play a little later. This was under the Department of the Navy and under the cognizance of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. They founded this task force. And the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence inserted a section on advanced aerial threats within the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, which directed this UAP task force to submit a report on UAP in unclassified form, but it could include a classified annex within 180 days of the enactment of the act. This act was then signed into law by President Trump in December of 2020. So 180 days later, it's June 2021, and this report comes out. It was only 9 pages long in the unclassified portion. And a summary is that they did say that UAP have been witnessed firsthand by military aviators, and they were collected from systems that they considered to be reliable, the data. The reports described incidents that occurred between 2004, which would have been the Nimitz experience, and then the 2021, with the majority coming in the last 2 years. That was because the Navy mechanism for reporting went into effect and encouraged people to report things. People saw and experienced things before it, but there was no official way to report it. So this report said there was 144 reports from U.S. government sources. Of these, 80 of the reports involved observation with multiple sensors. It was just one report out of all these that was identified with high confidence to be a balloon, but the other 143 remained unexplained. Per investigative journalist George Knapp, though, he says higher-ups removed the high-ranking official who was in charge of this UAP task force. He was very knowledgeable, and the Navy, though, assigned him to other duties. 2 staffers were given this assignment. They had full-time jobs, so they had to get it done in their spare time. They put together a comprehensive report about a massive, complicated 74-year-old plus mystery, and they did it in a mere 6 months. They had $0 to spend. They had a 0 budget. They likely had to deal with opposition in high levels in the military and other intelligence agencies concerning this subject of UAP. So this has been a constant theme, that there seems to be factions within the government, and it's kind of going back and forth as some progress is made. There's other people trying to thwart it. And so even though they put into effect, into law, that this UAP task force had to put out a report, they didn't get any money to do it. And then in November 23rd, 2021, Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks established the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. I really don't know how anybody pronounces it. IOMSIG or something like that. And that was only in operation briefly with that name. The UAP task force transitioned into that. And then Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who is also very important with this, and here's Marco Rubio again, and then we have Congressman Ruben Gallego. They've also did important work with creating legislation to create the office to coordinate and study UAPs government-wide, and also to submit unclassified reports to Congress, as well as hold semi-annual classified briefings for legislatures. This legislation that they put together was signed by President Biden into law in December 2021. And then in May of 2022, Senator Andre Carson said Congress hasn't held a public hearing on unidentified aerial phenomena in over 50 years. That will change next week when I lead a hearing in the House Intel Committee on this topic and the national security risk it poses. Americans need to know more about these unexplained occurrences. So it was slated for Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. And the people that the committee called in was Ronald S. Moultrie, who is the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, and also Scott W. Bray, who is the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence. So here's Representative, I think I called him Senator. Here's Representative Andre Carson leading the committee hearing. And here's Scott Bray, and he's saying the reports of the sightings are frequent and continuing. And the database has now grown to contain approximately 400 cases from the 144 that was previously officially reported. And they showed this video with this little object flying through really quick, but that's unidentified. And here's Ronald Moultrie saying we're open to all hypotheses, supposedly. And then in July of 2022, the U.S. Department of Defense established the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is in effect right now. This is known to be at ARROW, and that AOMSIG transferred into this. This is their little logo, and it's kind of interesting. It says, the universe is changing. Our life is what our thoughts make it. That's kind of an interesting quotes there for something that's studying UAP. Then in July of 2022, the All Domain Anomaly Research Resolution Office, ARROW, joined Twitter. And they said, welcome to the official Twitter account. The only thing is, a year later, Mark Warner, who is the chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and Marco Rubio, who is the vice, they sent this letter to the Honorable Lloyd Austin and Avril Haines, and they were saying, hey, things are going slow in getting this office up and running. Why is everything moving so slow? And you established a Twitter presence like almost a year ago, but you didn't tweet anything. You didn't put anything in there. It's blank. So then in December 2022, President Joe Biden signed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2023 into law. And this one was important because this is where the term changed from unidentified aerial phenomena to unidentified anomalous phenomena. But as I mentioned, it still means that we're talking about airborne objects and also transmedium objects. Those are objects that can be seen in the air going into the water, from space going into the air, from space going into the air, going into the water, and vice versa. So it contains all of these types of objects doing all these types of things. They want to study them. But the main thing that was important about this new legislation is what's known as the whistleblower protections. They created a secure method by which current or former government employees or contractors can submit UAP-related information to the ARROW office and Congress without fear of retribution or prosecution. The problem is that all of these things are classified, and so people aren't allowed, if they sign these NDAA or non-disclosure agreements, they're not allowed to say anything, or they'll get in a lot of trouble. So this legislation says, wait a minute, if you've signed something related to UAP, you can tell us, Congress, and you can tell ARROW. You still can't go public, but you can tell us, Congress. Some people have reported that they feel still a little uncomfortable speaking to the ARROW office. More of the people supposedly have spoken to congressional members. And here's Senator Kirsten Gillibrand just in March of this year also asking why ARROW was not fully funded for the second year in a row. So you can say, yay, they've made all this progress with legislation and setting up these government programs to study UAP, but they weren't funded. And so she's asking the question there. And then a few months later, she put out a memo saying she did finally secure full funding for the UAP office. Then in April 2023, there was a closed hearing that she was going to run, and she did, to examine the AARO office, and that was followed by an open session. And here she is chairing this meeting. The only person that came was Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who is the director of the AARO office. And he showed this video from the Middle East, again, a small object moving quickly across the screen. In some of the statements that he made during this hearing, he said AARO is now composed of more than 36 experts. They're now tracking 650 cases of UAP, that Congress has referred 24 people with UAP-related information to the AARO office. But then he says, please prioritize who you send to AARO, as they have a small research staff, and he asked for patience. Well, it's been a couple of years, and he's still asking for patience. He did show this as part of a PowerPoint presentation, and then he also presented this at NASA's meeting, which I will describe in a minute. On this chart, he says here that most of the objects are round, which is like in the videos that they showed, and that there is a collection bias when they say where they've picked up these data. The collection bias is, this is where the military is, and so the sensors are picking this up when the military are at these places. So it's not that there's more UAP activity here, it's just that that's what they've been picking up because military is there. Dr. Kirkpatrick also said, I should also state clearly for the record that in our research, AARO has found no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity, off-world technology, or objects that defy the known laws of physics. And he also admonished, let's say, UFO enthusiasts to submit their information to peer-reviewed journals, which, by the way, people have been trying to do, and these peer-reviewed journals hadn't been accepting it. That's starting to change, but come on, you can't just tell people, you know, you should have been submitting it, you know, to be real research, when the journals weren't even accepting really good research. That's starting to change a little bit now. John Ramirez was interviewed on Fade to Black, and Jimmy Church asked him about this. And John Ramirez pointed out something really important, saying, well, when Kirkpatrick is talking, he's really using government speak, which is very specific. So when he says they found no evidence of extraterrestrial, he essentially means he hasn't found any evidence that they're traveling beyond our Earth to light years away. Well, because they haven't, the sensors aren't up there. The sensors that they've been getting it from is in our airspace. So it could be something anomalous, maybe related to some other beings or something, but in the way he says it, extraterrestrial for him meant something different than it does for the regular people. So he wasn't lying, really. It was in the use of the terminology. And then NASA also put together their own UAP independent study, but they focused on just what data is out there. How can you collect future data? And so it wasn't really a study on UAP. It was just, where's the data? How can we collate it? What's, you know, and then based on that, what can we possibly do to collect it? So it was kind of not that interesting of a meeting that they had in May 31st. They were really collecting more information when they had this meeting. But the good guy of the whole meeting, I think, is this Mike Gold. I hadn't heard about him before. I like him. One of the things he said is there's plenty of stigma in this building, because they were talking about some of the people on this committee that I just showed here getting harassed in emails and in other ways just for being on the committee. And so Mike Gold said, well, there's even plenty of stigma in this building, meaning the NASA building. And then he called for a permanent office at NASA, saying he didn't want all of the work for that committee to be in vain. And they have a web page that you can go to keep update on what they're doing, science.nasa.gov/UAP. All right, so I'm going to end tonight with the most recent information that's really interesting. David Grush. In April of this year, David Grush left the government after an over 14-year career in the U.S. intelligence. From 2019 to 2022, David Grush worked on the UAP task force, first as a representative of the National Reconnaissance Office, and then later as the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency's representative. From his research, Grush believes that there have been recoveries of partial fragments as well as intact vehicles of non-human origin that have been made for decades through the present day by the government, its allies, and defense contractors. Grush believes that information about secret programs that possess these retrieved craft of non-human origin have been wrongfully withheld from Congress, whose duty it is to provide oversight to these programs. In a complaint he filed with the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community on May 25th, 2022, he alleged that after he confidentially submitted certain disclosures related to UAP to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense in 2021, his identity was improperly disclosed to parties outside of the IG's office, and that as a result of this, he subsequently was subject to months of retaliation and reprisals. Grush alleged that the reprisals included the removal of his access to various compartmented programs. Remember, I told you there's kind of like two different factions going on here. So Grush is coming forward, he's saying what he found, and people are trying to retaliate against him. And if he gets his removal of his access, then he can't really do his job. That's a big deal for these folks to have his classification status intact. So he first reported these allegations in an article that appeared on the website, The Debrief, in June of this year, written by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. They were the two that, along with Helene Cooper, wrote the New York Times article back in December 16th, 2017. So they elaborated in there about what David Grush told them, and then also wrote Ross Coulthart, who was an Australian journalist. He broke it on News Nation on June 5th, and then the full interview was on June 11th. Ross has said he has more of the interview that he hopes to put out to the public at some point as well. Grush said that while assigned to the UAP task force, he received classified information from multiple current and former senior intelligence officers who said they were part of or had knowledge of a long-standing, highly secret program. He called this a broad UFO crash retrieval program. He said his sources told him that this program is engaged in attempts to reverse engineer quite a number of technical vehicles, call it spacecraft, if you will, of non-human origin. So let's go back to Congress. Chuck Schumer just the other day put out a tweet introducing new legislation to declassify government records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena and UFOs as an amendment to the NDAA for this year, well, to be signed this year for next year, modeled after the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act. So more legislation is being put out, this time to help declassify the UFO records. And then another person we will end with is Representative Tim Burchett, who's really been a champion for these efforts. And on June of this year, James Comer, who is the chairperson of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, said he had tasked two of the members of the committee, Representative Tim Burchett and Anna Paulina Luna, to put together a public hearing on the UAP subject. And literally just today, Tim Burchett tweeted out, the House Oversight Committee will hold a hearing on UAPs on Wednesday, July 26th. We're done with the cover-ups. So mark your calendars. That's next week from when I'm presenting this. Depends when you watch this, if this hearing will still be in the future or will be in the past. But Tim Burchett is assuring us that he has important people there. Maybe some of the pilots, maybe some of the whistleblowers. We'll see. He's not having government people come. He's having people with real experience or that can talk about what they know. So this is going to be an excellent hearing, I think. Mark your calendar, July 26th. And I want to thank you. I know that was real quick, but that was so important to get us up to speed if you're a beginner and to remind us people who have been following this. A lot has gone on. I left a lot out too, but really, we're really at this wonderful paradigm shifting moment. Let's join together, put our attention on it. Really, let's change the culture. Let's open up to this. We can learn so much. We can grow as humanity. Let's do it. Take care.